June, you got a Bible? Need one? Okay. You're good? Excellent. Right, we are going to talk today and focus our attention today on a segment in which the issue of life, death, and resurrection is the key thought. And of course, those are just bringing those thoughts up. Right away we go, oh, I need to know about this. Because the two things in life that are sure are death and taxes, right? And we need to have an answer to death. We'll probably never have an answer to taxes. I guess that is what it is. But we need an answer to death. We just do. And so to just get us started and get us thinking about it on your own, without talking to anybody, just on your own, think about 3 ways that death impacts our life. Just think on 3 ways that death impacts our life. And you can be serious, you can be somewhat whimsical if you wish. Oh, look at that. Good morning, Chris. Good morning. I almost got you to the right page here. You got your own Bible? You do. Okay. Take 2, they're small. All right, I'm going to pop around and just hear some thoughts from a variety of people. Let's hear about 5 thoughts, ways death impacts us. Sue, get us started. Give me just one. Yeah, we miss people who have gone to heaven. My in-laws went to heaven. Probably, I shouldn't necessarily say went to heaven because some people that we know don't go to heaven. But my in-laws went to heaven about, I don't know, I guess 8-10 years ago. Still miss them a whole lot. So absolutely. What else? Yeah, all of a sudden you can find yourself ahead of a household when you kind of weren't expecting to be that.
Monetarily, it can change your life if it was a spouse or if you have to pay for the funeral expenses.
Boy, monetarily, financially, it can change your life amazingly. And just like that, Chris, there's a constant worry factor that goes into these sorts of things. When you watch TV particularly and you hear people, when they get to the point of being ready to talk about it, wow. It's really tough on people who are out in the world. Absolutely so. Any other thoughts that you want to bring to the table? Thank God that we know how to be ready for death. And that's what today's study is going to continue to. We know where we're going. And so for us, death becomes a very different thing, which thank God it is that, because for most of the world, it's not. Sue?
Difficult on you and the people around you, but it's also kind of cool because then you can hopefully does it by because of that you know where you're going.
The death process can open up both challenges and opportunities. If I am dying of something where I know it's coming, cancer or something like that, that there can be opportunities to rebuild relationships, to give witness to faith, et cetera, et cetera. So death can be a real blessing for us. Mary? There can be a sense of relief aspect to it, both for the person who dies because they get to go to heaven, and for the person or for the people who've been caregivers and relievers. It can be. It's also interesting to note that sometimes for people who have really dedicated themselves to being a caregiver for a good while, when the person dies, all of a sudden their life loses a sense of purpose, sort of drifting a little bit aimlessly. So yeah, a whole bunch of thoughts like that are on the table. And well, good morning, men. You'll want study guides. My son Adam, everybody. Give him a hand. Woohoo! He's good. Thanks a lot, Dad. There you go. We're going to 2 Kings, in which Elisha figures very prominently. And we're going to use that as kind of a bounce-off point to review and remember some truths about death and resurrection. And we'll also take a look at the resurrection segments, some of the resurrection segments in the New Testament today as well. So we're not going to spend as much time in 2 Kings. We'll actually spend a little bit more time in the New Testament today. All right, let's pick up at 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. One day Elisha went to Shunem. Shunem is kind of, if you where you see Samaria, you'd go north of there and a little bit to the east. So probably about where the top of the R is in Israel, that's about where Shunem would have been located. And a well-to-do woman was there. The Hebrew is literally a great woman was there, which could be translated a whole bunch of different ways, but well-to-do seems to be a reasonable way, who urged him to stay for a meal. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat. She said to her husband, I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof and put it on a bed and put in it a bed and a table, a chair and a lamp for him. Then he can stay there whenever he comes to us. Now, we can read past that really easily, but stop and think about it. How many of you would be willing to remodel your house so that your pastor could come by erratically and have a place to stay? Whoa, this is a big deal. This is huge. And there's some thought that the portion of the house that was used may have been the nicest portion because it would have probably been the part where the cool breezes of the evening would have blown by and been really comfortable. So you take that part and turn it into a bedroom for the prophet when he comes by, whenever he comes by. This is a big deal that these people are doing. And so again, it's easy to read past that and not realize what a huge thing this is. One day when Elisha came, he went up to his room and lay down there. He said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite. So he called her and she stood before him. Elisha said to him, now this is really odd. It seems as if what you have is Elisha, you have Gehazi and the Shunammite woman who are both there, and Elisha is going to talk to Gehazi, not to the Shunammite woman. And I have zero explanation for it, because you don't see this anywhere else in Elisha's ministry as to why he would be doing it this way. It's almost like he's working through an intermediary. It's a little strange, and I have zero explanation. I wish I did, but I just don't. Elisha said to him, to Gehazi, tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army, which gives you some insight into the circles in which Elisha rolled, that he had access to the king, he had access to the commander of the army. Wow. God used Elisha in some pretty amazing ways. She replied, I have a home among my own people. Again, we're going to have to say, not exactly sure what that means. Is she saying, I'm very content, I have everything I need? I have a home among my own people. Or is she saying kind of glumly, resignedly, I have a home among my people? Like, this is what the Lord has meted out to me, and I'm stuck with this. And it is what it is. And what can you do about it? We're going to have to leave it open and say we're not exactly sure which direction we should take about it. What can be done for her, Elisha asked. Gehazi said, well, she has no son and her husband is old. Does that remind you of anybody? Sarah and Abraham. There seems to be some degree of connection between those two accounts. Then Elisha said, call her. So apparently the Shunammite woman has gone out and now they're bringing her back in. So he called her and she stood in the doorway. About this time next year, Elisha said, you will hold a son in your arms. Again, does that ring any bells? Boy, that's the Abraham account all over the place, isn't it? In fact, the Hebrew words that are used, you'll find those same Hebrew words back in Genesis. That God is making a connection here between what's going on with the birth of Isaac and with the birth of the Shunammite woman's son. No, my Lord, she objected. Don't mislead your servant, O man of God. But the woman became pregnant. And the next year, about that time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. The child grew, and one day he went out to his fathers, who was with the reapers. My head, he said to his fathers. His father told the servant, carry him to his mother. After the servant had lifted him up and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, then shut the door and went out. She called her husband and said, please send me one of the servants and a donkey so I can go to the man of God quickly and return. I go to him today, he asked. It's not the new moon or the Sabbath. It's all right, she said. That the Hebrew word there literally is shalom. It's peace. So, and that word's going to occur a number of times in the rest of this account where she just says peace. And I think it's fair to say, how come the dad doesn't ask about the kid? Just not recorded for us, but you kind of get the impression that he doesn't, that he just kind of forgets that, and he asks, well, I don't get it. What are you doing what you're doing? Did any of you grow up on a farm? You grew up on a farm? Talk to me about harvest time. How is harvest time? What's harvest time like on the farm? It's hard working. Everybody's pitching in. What kind of hours are you working? Oh man, you are working long hours. My in-laws are farmers, and they're up at 6 in the morning and they're going till 10 at night. And it's just hit it. And now put yourself back to, what are we talking here, about 800 BC, give or take, 825 BC probably. So we're looking at 2,800 years ago, and where they were totally reliant on what they were going to harvest from that year to live for the next year. So how hard do you think they worked during their harvest times? Oh boy, Dad's attention is on his most important work at that most important time of the year. So not shocking that he kind of whiffs in regards to some of his parental relationship issues going on. Not saying it's okay, but he's just got a ton of other stuff on his mind where he's trying to get this stuff done. And so he asks just the kind of pertinent questions. What are you doing that for? It's not the normal time to talk to the prophet. It's not Sunday, to put it in our parlance. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, lead on. Don't slow down for me unless I tell you. So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When he saw her in the distance, the man of God said to his servant Gehazi, look, there's the Shunammite. Run to meet her and ask, are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right? Everything's all right, she said. And all those words that are translated all right is the word shalom. That's the word peace. They're over and over and over again. When she reached the man of God at the mountain, she took hold of his feet. And it's interesting because the Hebrew word there, where it says she took hold of his feet, is the same Hebrew word that was used back in verse 8, where it says she urged him to stay for a meal. And there's this sense of, I'm going to say aggressiveness. I don't know that that's quite the word I'm looking for. There's a sense of urgency in regards to that is maybe the right word to use, where she urgently encouraged him to stay there for a meal, and now she is on her feet, urgently grasping his feet because she needs his help. Make sense? So that's the exact same Hebrew word. Really an interesting connection there. Gehazi came over to push her away, but the man of God said, leave her alone. She's in bitter distress, but the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me why. Did I ask you for a son, my Lord? She said. Didn't I tell you don't raise my hopes? What an interesting statement there, huh? Elisha said to Gehazi, tuck your cloak into your belt, take my staff in your hand and run. If you meet anyone, don't greet him, and if anyone greets you, don't answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face. But the child, and again, we're going to have to ask the question, what does this mean? Good Lutheran question. Not much of a good Lutheran answer on this one. Was Elisha saying that this was a way that Gehazi could serve as his intermediary and perhaps raise the boy to life? Was this Elisha saying, Gehazi, get there and protect the body, make sure nobody takes the body away because the prophet is coming, and by laying my staff across the boy, that's saying to everybody else, hands off. This is for me to deal with. We're just going to have to, again, leave it as an open question and say, not real sure. But the child's mother said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and told him the boy has not awakened, which perhaps leads us to think that the explanation was that Gehazi thought, and maybe Elisha thought, that this would be a way that God would raise the child back to life, but it didn't happen. When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he got in the bed and lay upon the boy, mouth to mouth, eye to eye, hands to hands. As he stretched himself out upon him, the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out upon him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite, and he did. When she came, he said, take her son. She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she took her son and went out. Why does Elisha lay on the child? No idea. Why does it get recorded that he sneezed 7 times? No idea. So there are a whole lot of aspects of this account where we just have to scratch our head a little bit and say, I don't know. But there is one thing that comes absolutely through in this account, and that is the reality that death was always in the picture. On your own, quickly think through this account and see if you can come up with at least 2 ways, maybe 3 ways, that you could see death in the picture. And yes, you can count as one of your obvious ones, the boy died. All right, I gave you your first. Now you got to try to come up with 2 more. Give you another 30 seconds to think about it, and then we'll talk about it. Seen a number of pens which are going kind of furiously, which is fun to see. Let's hear some thoughts. What are some ways that death was kind of always in the picture? Some may be obvious, some not so much. What do you think? Get us started.
The reason that she was given the son in the first place was her husband had passed away.
You've got an issue here where the husband is old, so he's going to die. and probably fairly soon. And if she has no son, which she didn't have, we're not told if she had any daughters, but if she doesn't have a son, then for sure the land is going to go somewhere else. And who's going to take care of her? Good question. Because there were no welfare things set up in those days. Usually widows were taken care of by their children. Her husband's old. That's in the picture. What else? Yeah. She pointed out that when she comes to Elisha, she says, "Why did I ask you for a son? Oh, he's dead." Perhaps in some ways her thought is, it'd have been easier if I'd have never had him. Why in the world did you do this? This makes it harder, not easier. And yet, was there some inkling that the man of God could or would do something? Maybe. Or was it simply she knew he's the man of God, and I've got to go to him because I've got to get my head straightened out. And the man of God is in connection with God in ways that I'm not, and he can help me get my head straightened out. Similar to the way we might say at a time of death, I've got to call my pastor, which I would encourage you strongly to do, by the way. I've got to call my pastor. Not necessarily that he can do anything, and no, he doesn't have Elisha's staff. At least I never did. Do you have one? No, don't have one of those. So, but hopefully, prayerfully, our pastors, our spiritual leaders, and it could be a teacher, it could be a staff minister, it could be somebody else who you respect, an elder in the congregation, a fellow Christian who you just respect highly, whatever, who can help you get your head on straight. So it may be that's what she was looking for, or maybe more. Hard to say. Mary? Yeah. Yeah, as the cars do their weaving in and out. Yeah. Yeah, we are always one step from death, because how interesting. We have an old husband. We have apparently a somewhat aging wife. We don't really know because some time passes in this whole account. And then we have what seems to be a little boy. He seems to be pretty young because he's able to sit on his mother's lap. So he probably isn't a teenager at this point. Probably pretty young. Who of that group are you expecting to die? The father, then the mother, but not the kid. Huh? And yet it's the child who dies, and that reminder that death is always right there. I saw Margaret, and then I saw Pastor H. He gave me this child once, and that was a miracle. Does God have the ability to do another miracle? Yeah, he does. Now, he hadn't promised to, and so she doesn't know, but she grasps. And did you notice the word that she used when she said that she was not going to leave Elisha? Did you catch the name for God she used? Surely as the Lord lives, all caps. And that's that name for God in the Old Testament, which reflects that God is faithful to his grace, to his promises, to his love. As surely as the Lord lives, faith always clings to God, to his faithfulness, to his promises. And so you did a miracle for me once, Lord. Do another miracle if that's what was right. And if that's what's going on in her head, finally, we just don't know if that's for sure what's going on in her head. But she wants the man of God to come. Pastor H. Yeah. And death is right there in the background with all of these little aches and pains, which leads us into the question of what did this young man die of? And Pastor H hit a couple of the thoughts. Was it some sort of an aneurysm? Could be. Was it some sort of sunstroke? Could be. Some people think there was a diabetes issue that can manifest itself as a strong headache. Could be. Ultimately, God chose not to tell us. He just chose to tell us that the child died. I'm going to throw one more out there so that we can, and then we'll move on. What if the lady does have a child, and when the child is very young, the old husband dies? Now her life is dramatically worse, because now she's a single mom with no support system trying to raise a child, which meant she would have probably had to sell herself into slavery. Ooh. And so the whole issue of death being in the background on this impacts this account in just all kinds of different ways. And yet we see these wonderful lessons from God about life and death. What are some of the lessons we learned from this account about life and death? I've bounced kind of down to number 3. I want to come back to number 2 to close this account up. But bounce to number 3. Margaret. She would have remained rich. The problem would have been she wouldn't have been able to work the land. And so it depends on what the family situation was like. We're not told if the husband had brothers who could have helped her. That's a possibility. Would she have had enough financial means to be able to continue to hire workers to be able to work the land and keep herself supported? Possibly. But now put yourself back in that situation. So you're a lady with no male help really behind you. You're in a kind of dangerous situation. We have to put ourselves back 2,800 years. You just don't have the protections that are out there in 21st century American life for these sorts of things. So we don't know for sure what would have happened. Would she have had enough financial means to keep herself afloat? Possibly so. But the reality was, if her husband dies and she's got a little one, she is in a world of hurt. Almost undoubtedly, given the way culture worked back in those days. I think, or Margaret, do you want to follow up on that? The way the culture worked, she would have probably had, and we have to say we don't know for sure all the ins and outs of this stuff. The Old Testament gives us some things, but some of the events that happened aren't always totally consistent with what the Levitical law said it should have been. And so we just have to realize we're not exactly sure how all this stuff transpired. But she would have probably had the right to stay on the land and hold it out for a while. But that becomes a whole different animal than when you own it. Yeah, you feel sorry for her. Absolutely. And that's part of what is going on in the background of this. This lady who seems to have everything, she's a Isha Gedolah, is what the Hebrew literally says, a great woman, there's a lot of hurt that's going on in the background and a lot of challenges that are going on in the background of this, and yet she's also a woman of great faith. Or wait, I'm sorry, I saw your hand up. Okay, I'll come to you, Gina.
The parable tells us a little about what we prayed for. In this case, it came out exactly what she wanted. It doesn't always come that way, and that means a problem. How come? For example, somebody gets cancer. The family says, Lord, take away the cancer. It's the wrong prayer. The prayer is, Lord, do what's best for your kingdom in this case. It may be that in this case, it was what she wanted exactly. The Lord answered her prayer.
Yeah, And it's kind of interesting to note a couple of things. Does the lady ever ask Elisha to raise her son from the dead? No, she never asks. All she does is say, here's the issue. And at that point, and then you come back to this shalom thing. Was she making a confession of faith? This is okay, but I have to have somebody to get my head straight. Absolutely so. Secondly, would it have been wrong for her to ask Elisha to raise her son from the dead? No. God urges and encourages us to ask for anything and everything. But he does not promise to give us everything we ask for. Right? Which takes us into question. Well, sorry, Gina has been waiting patiently.
Just another thought on this is when Elisha said to her that he has the ear of the king and the ear of the army, the head of the army, if they could not have helped this widow.
Certainly possible. We'll have to leave that in the realm of speculation because we just don't know. But if things happen the way things usually happen in that culture, the likelihood was she was going to be in some degree of trouble. So, but could there have been some other stuff that it could, maybe, but ultimately it didn't happen that way. So I guess we don't have to worry too much about it. The point well taken and well made that Elisha would have had the opportunity to possibly step in here too, which is a good point. So, but go to number 3 now. And you guys are already touching on it. What are some of the lessons about life and death that God is reminding us of or teaching us about here in this account? I think I saw Chris first and then Sue. Yeah, there is this sort of little hint thing there. The boy is not awakened. Is there a little hint of the reminder that for the believer, death is merely a sleep that Jesus will wake us up from someday? We'll see a hint of that in the New Testament in a moment, if we get there. The huge reality that God is in charge of all these things is huge. Who ultimately decided to give the child? God did. Who ultimately decided that the child should die? God did. Who ultimately decided that the child should be raised back to life? God did. And that very simple reminder for us that God is in charge of these things is really important for a couple of reasons. Why is it so important? For what reasons is it so important for us to be reminded that God is in charge of this stuff? Sue? What an encouragement for us, no matter what's going on in our life, to know that ultimately God is in charge of it. Whether my life is running merrily and wonderfully, quote unquote, or whether it's struggling along, quote unquote, God is ultimately in charge of it. What an incredibly good news thing that is for us. There's also a law as a mirror thing here. There's also a law as a mirror thing going on here. Mary? The wages of sin is death. Absolutely. And we might like to think we're in charge of our life, but reality is very, very different. Very, very different. What would it take for your life to change dramatically? Yeah, one of those people driving out there on Sherman Boulevard. Huh? And all of a sudden your life would change dramatically, just like that. Or for the doctor to find a tumor. Or for yada, 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 yada. Huh? Our life can change dramatically just like that. Thank God. Who's in charge of it? God is. Who's that Yahweh God full of free and faithful love and grace. Really, really cool. Now, back to number 2. Or go ahead.
God uses physical means to us Christians, and also I also thought about three persons here involved in the Father, the prophet, and the Son, the Trinity.
I'd probably be very uncomfortable with that last one. I wouldn't go there. But you asked the question, would it be okay for us to point out that God makes use of physical means here? Yes, we could go that far and say God in wonderful grace loves to make use of physical means. Now, I would not see a reference to the sacraments per se, but what I would be willing to say is similar to how God would make use of some really simple water to work a miracle in the heart of a child or an adult by placing his name on them. That God will use the simple, the mundane, like Elisha's staff, which was just a piece of wood. All it was. But God made use of that in this account. God made use of Elisha's body, which was just a mortal human body. It wasn't like Elisha had some sort of life ray emanating from out of himself. No, he's just a normal human body, and yet God made use of that. Can God make use of very simple human things? Absolutely so. I would stop short of saying there's an allegorical interpretation here, because everything about the text indicates that it's a real account. But your point is a good one.
No matter what happens in life, you always have to think back. First of all, what you pray is your will be done. Not my will, but your will. Your will is always.
Which is a really important aspect to this whole issue of life and death. That all this week, go back to saying, Lord, your will be done. Not mine, yours. Your will be done. Bounce back to number 2. This account had to dramatically change this family's approach to life and death. How so? How would this account have changed their approach to life and death from then on? Good morning. The son was given to them, taken away, then given back, which is going to lead to, I would hope that we would see faith in God's ability to do whatever needs to be done. Excellent. Chris. I would imagine he said that they probably were led to treasure this child immensely, even more so than they probably already did. But wow, they experienced what it would have been like to be without him and now got him back. Man, thank you, God, for that treasured gift of life. Say again? Well, at least he didn't when the wife takes off to go. Our guess is that he probably found out because the distance from Shunem to Carmel and back is significant. We're looking at probably at least 15 miles one way. So to get to Carmel and get back, the likelihood of them finding something out in the field would seem to be pretty high. And I'm also going to guess that the woman didn't keep this a secret. And we know for sure it didn't stay a secret because it's written down. And so we know for sure that it got recorded. So eventually he would have found out. Yeah. I always laugh. We're going to read, we're going to read a little bit of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, Lazarus is, of course, telling his story, telling people what had happened to him. And people are going, man, this is incredible. And the response of the Jewish religious leaders is to say, we better put him to death. I can only imagine Lazarus going, yeah, been there, done that. Is that the worst you got? It's just as funny how this is the worst they've got, and Lazarus has already been through it. And so perhaps that was in the background too. Let's go ahead and flip the page over. We're not going to have as much time to spend on these, but we'll have a chance to look through some of it. So how should I do this? Let's I don't know. Let's take, you guys take John 11. You guys over here take John 11. And you guys over here take Luke 7 and Mark 5. Take Luke 7 and Mark 5. And as you don't have to read them for a ton of detail. If you see details, fantastic. These are familiar accounts to you, I think. And so read through them quickly. But what I want you to do is pick out at least one thought from your account or accounts that leads us to live as the eternal winners that God has made us to be. How do these accounts lead you to live as the eternal winners that God has made you to be? Give you about 5 minutes to read those through, and that will give us about 7 minutes to report to each other. And remember, your question is pick out a thought which helps us to deal with death as the eternal winners which God has made us to be. How are we going to deal with death as the eternal winners which God has made us to be? All right, guys, let's go ahead and come back together. We're just running a little short on time, so I want to have a chance to at least poke at this a little bit. Let's start over here with the group on my right, and I will summarize real quickly. This is a good portion of the account of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. You'll remember that Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus and said, the one who you love is sick, come. And Jesus says, cool, I'll come, but he doesn't come, not right away. He hangs out there for a couple more days, and then he says to his disciples, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. The disciples totally don't get it. Well, if he's sleeping, he'll get better. No. He's dead. Now it's time to go there. Well, why are we going there now? Martha meets Jesus and says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you want. I'm the resurrection and the life. Believes in me, even though he lives, or even though he dies, yet he will live. And a man who lives and believes in me will never die. Goes out to the grave. When he gets to the grave, he cries. And then he says, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man comes out. And there's a big commotion. It's quite the deal. All right, what'd you pull for thoughts in regards to how this account leads you to be the eternal winner that God has made you to be? Gina, want to start us? Key thought in verse 25 of that segment, which says, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. Which, does that hearken us back to Exodus chapter 3 at the burning bush, where God appears to Moses and says, I am who I am? Yes, likely there is an echo of that in that account. And Jesus saying, I am the resurrection and the life. You believe in me, you don't really die. You just sleep. Just sleep. Go ahead. There's no other religion that says that. Yeah. Yep. Every other religion has something to do with work it out on your own, be a good person. If you are a good person, you might be able to be reincarnated, but nobody else says there's resurrection and life here. It just isn't there, not in the same way as it is for you. Really cool. Why do people not see it? Boy. There is the ultimate question, isn't it? Yeah. Why do some people come to trust this and why do others not? Ultimately, we have to say that's a mystery that's in the hands of God himself. And what he has said to us is, you keep sharing the powerful word and I'll take care of how it impacts different people, and our prayers that more and more will come to know. Absolutely so. Any other thoughts in regards to this? Good enough? Let's go over here. You had two accounts. The first account, Luke chapter 7, is the account of Jesus raising the widow at Nain's son. Now, what you may not know is that Nain is probably either exactly at the same spot or within a couple miles of Shunem. Is there an echo here where Jesus is using that account that you just studied to remind the people that one greater than Elisha is here? Because he doesn't have to go through all these contortions and doesn't have to run and doesn't have to lay a staff and just can say to the young man, I say to you, get up. Boom, up he gets. Is there a portion of that going on here? Very well could be that Jesus is doing that, which is a very cool thing. All right, Megan. Yeah, I think you hit a key thought. It's totally okay for us to cry our tears. Jesus himself went to the graveside of Lazarus and wept. But don't wallow in it. Because ultimately the believer in Jesus goes to heaven, and eventually Jesus will raise the believer back to life. Now, it may not be quite as soon as what happened to the widow at Nain's son. In fact, almost undoubtedly it won't be. But eventually it will happen. It will happen. Absolutely. Good. And how about or Wayne, go ahead.
Good stories. Two passages teach us one thing. God never makes evil happen. He uses evil for his own purpose. He healed somebody, and he did not kill the camel, or what was it that was brought into the ocean. I forget the second story. It's in Mark.
Are you thinking about when the demons went into the pigs?
Where the sheep went down or the cattle went down and they drowned.
Yeah, that's the pigs, and it's the demons that went into the pigs. Yeah. When we talk about those things, we have to talk about it two different ways. Will God cause sin? No, God will never cause sin. That he promises. Will God cause distress, hardship? Yes, he will. And he does that if it's for our good. Just like you, if you're a good parent, be careful on this, but if you're a parent who loves their children and think that vaccinations are a good thing, which I think most of us probably do, you probably had your child vaccinated. And it hurt. And your child looked at you and went, "What are you doing?" As that prick went into their skin and flesh. And you said, "I'm doing this because I love you." Yeah. And that's a really good way to talk about it. All right. The other one, Chris had a question. When they get, Jesus is asked by, I just blew a gas. Jairus, thank you. Jairus asked Jesus to come and heal his child because his child is dying. And Jesus says, "Okay, I'll come." And then there's this lady along the way who touches him. And Jesus heals her, but there's crowds pressing all along, and Jesus stops and says, "Who touched me?" Wow, there's people crowding all over the place around him. "Who touched me?" What do you mean, who touched you? And finally, this lady comes, "It was me." There's all kinds of stuff in that account, but one of the things Jesus wants to do here is unlock her from her guilt. And so he says to her, "Go in peace. Your faith," which was focused on him, has healed you. And you can only imagine the father going, come on, why are you wasting all this time? My child's dying. Let's go. And Jesus gets there, and there's a great commotion. And Chris asked about the great commotion. In those days, part of the culture was that when there was a death, you would hire professional mourners. And the more mourning that went on, the more you were showing your quote-unquote love for the person who had died. Is that the confession of the believer? No, it really isn't. And so Jesus comes and says, "Why all this commotion?" And is he confronting them? I think the answer is yes, in a very gentle way. Why all this commotion? And he says the child's not dead but asleep. Oh, do we hear an echo from 2 Kings 4? Yeah, maybe so. Child hasn't awakened. And of course they laugh at him. And then Jesus goes into the room and raises the child back to life. What are the lessons you took from it? Megan, start us off. Death is just a sleep. For the believer, it is totally changed. It is no longer punishment. It is now just a falling asleep to wake up looking into the eyes of the Savior. That is amazing. And to know that changes every aspect of your life. If you don't have to be terrified of death, what's left to be terrified of? Pretty well nothing. Pretty well nothing. What a gracious God you have who has made you to be an eternal winner. Amen? Amen. The schedule for the next couple weeks is a little bit up in the air, but next week for sure we will have an open forum. So next week it's the schedule for the open forum. We have one more lesson left in our Elijah Elisha series. So I will be teaching that sometime. We will get back to you as to exactly when that time will be, okay? If you've already worshiped the Lord, go enjoy in peace. If you're staying for the at-one service, go and meet some folks you haven't yet met. The Bibles are going into the